I have a similar experience, like because of the word empathy, you think like, oh, what is this? Like, it just seems so, sometimes can be quite abstract. Yeah. And you're thinking, huh, what do you mean? And I remember, because I also facilitate well, around the world and most recently in Africa. And I just remember running this training in, for example, in the Central African Republic. And people were kind of like, what is this? What are these toys? At first, you're like trying to figure it out. And at the very end, I mean, when we did the debrief, it was just incredible how each of I had about 60 people in that training. And everyone was just, all the different teams that came up were able to just really talk about empathy in a way that I'd never even imagined, because we're able to really connect it to their own lived experience in the workplace, because we're talking about, okay, where do we need empathy, and what are some things that promote or take away from empathy. And it was just amazing to hear their stories, and for me, I just felt like, oh my gosh. And they'd never talked about it before. They were they'd never talked about, I mean, the word empathy was never in their dictionary. It was never something that was part of their day-to-day conversations, and this was something that I felt like, wow, we really need to work on this. We really need to talk about this, because that's what impacts the team building. It impacts inclusion. It impacts how people feel, whether the people feel like they belong or not. It all starts with the conversations, right? Emotional intelligence. So yeah, I don't know your experiences. I'm sure you must have a lot. Like, have you ever had like this moment you're like, wow, they get it?
Yeah, I mean, in the early days, I think I must have run, I'm sure it was about 1,000 workshops.
Mm-hmm.
I don't run I mean, whenever we're designing something new, I'm involved, but I don't run them as much as, our director of training and facilitation, Ryan,
yeah.
is phenomenal. But yeah, in the early days, in the first few years, there were so many moments of just insights. I think for me, there was, what was it? There was one, okay, I did actually, I ran a workshop with about 200. No, I'll tell you. Okay, I'll tell two stories. So the first one is about a school. Mm-hmm. So there was a teacher that had been teaching with the empathy toy, and they decided to flip the script and they decided to take one of the students that was really like quite loud and would interrupt and get very excited. She made him the guide. So what that means is that he was given a built pattern, blindfolded, and then he would need to give directions to 3 other students that were also blindfolded with loose pieces. Mm-hmm. And he was giving his instructions, and they kept interrupting, and no one was listening. And then he got really frustrated, and he was like, if you don't stop talking, you're not going to get the right instructions, or we're not going to get this done. And then there was like a quietness in the room, and he goes, wow, being a teacher is really hard. And his teacher told us this story. She was so happy about it, but she was able to go back to that throughout the years and in the lessons, and relate back to just that one experience. And each game lasts 5-15 minutes. It's the debrief that happens immediately after, and then ongoing discussions. And it shouldn't be a one-off. It's definitely a toy that's used over and over. But the one other story I'll share is on the corporate end. So I was running a workshop with, I think, about 200 folks. And what we do in those workshops is, it was 10 tables with 20 people at it.
Okay.
And this is the opposite of that gameplay. There's so many different gameplays.
Yeah.
This one there is one builder, so one person with loose pieces, and then there's a built pattern in the middle of the table. So it's a circular table. Mm-hmm. The 19 other folks are seeing it from a different perspective, and they're guiding this one builder to build it. And so the timing started, and the dynamic when it's that many people, especially when it's in person, you can tell if you're doing well or not. So as some teams were finishing up and getting there, like you could see they're right in front of me, the table in front of me had not put a single piece together. Oof. And I started hearing everyone else cheering and laughing, and you could see how stressed out they were.
Yeah.
So I had to actually call it, and they never finished building the pattern. And I said, okay, who, I started to ask for insights. And the one builder at that table was like raising his hand, like very enthusiastically. And I went, okay, well, how did that go? And he said, we won. And I went, well, there are no winners. Mm-hmm. Also, like, you didn't win. You clearly did not like win. And he said, no, we won because, and this was a team in banking that dealt mostly a lot with customer service. He said, I was trying to build this and I was getting so frustrated. My team was not giving me the instructions I needed. And I was given all these different responses and no one asked me what I needed. And I started hearing other people who are doing well. And he had this insight. He said, oh, this is what our customers feel. This is how they feel when they're on the phone with us, when they're trying to problem solve and they're just getting all of this information, but no one's actually checking in with them to see where they're. So he goes, because of that, we won. And I was like, there are no winners, but also, yeah, okay.
I like that. I like what that person said. You know, the fact that, you know, they're throwing all these answers, but no one is actually listening. And right, like, and I think that's actually what happens during the games. That people want to just give you advice and like, do it this way, but no one is taking the time to listen, to figure out where you're coming from and if you're actually understanding it. And I think it ties into working in the workplace, because you're constantly working with projects, working with people, right? And it's so easy to miss the point. It's so easy to misunderstand what your colleague is trying to tell you, or maybe what your line manager is communicating.
Yeah,
right?
well, we always like to say it's understanding is more important than knowing. And so sometimes, depending, like if the house is on fire, sure, sometimes you just have to just tell me the information. But when you're collaborating, you're building a team, you're building trust, always start with understanding before you tell the person all the things that you know, because they may not be ready to receive it because you haven't built that trust, you haven't built that understanding yet. So that's one of the takeaways, I would say, from a lot of the insights you would get from playing.
I really like that. I'm going to write that down. Understanding is better than knowing. Is that what you said?
Understanding is more important.
More important.
So it's kind of, it translates to, if you're going to give someone information or the answer,
like that,
make sure that you're on the same page first. Make sure that you've spent, it can even be one sentence. It doesn't have to be a full conversation, but just understand that start from understanding.
Right. If you're on the same page, because that's the thing, like, are you on the same page? Right. Because if you're not, if you're having different ideas, then you've lost it already. You're already, on the losing end.
Same page. And trust building, I think, especially when we're in a remote world, that seems to be one of the most important elements, is that you need to trust that the other person you're talking to is working towards the same goals as you. And you can understand where they're coming from. And so often in remote, like I would joke, like, with your friends, if someone texts you and you don't text them back, and then they're like, are they mad at me?
Yeah.
Exclamation mark. What did they mean? Apply that to the business world. There's so many different ways that we can read into tone, inflection, what that person is feeling or thinking. And so if you don't build that in, giving time for folks to build that trust, and doing that through play is the most powerful way to build trust. It's going to show up in different ways. It's going to show up in tensions when things are going well a little bit, but the second things are stressful or difficult. Yeah. That's why you invest in team building. That's why you invest in this work. It's not for the good days. It's for the bad days.
For the bad days. Absolutely. And I guess the question I would ask would be,